The heart does not think of itself in such simple, organic terms. In its non-functioning mind, racked with pain and riddled with memories of its time as a powerful, divine creature, it still relives its past glories, mourning its power lost and rueing the day that it chose to cross Father Dagon. However, as tenuous as the connection that it has may be to the surrounding prison that contains it, it is nonetheless aware that now there are creatures coming that want to take the last of itself, its very essence, its consciousness, its divine flesh. And so as a tempest roars through this cavernous space in which it hangs suspended in its bone cage, the heart gears itself for one potentially final battle. Hello friends, Anderson here. Welcome back to Oksana, Thief, Gladiator, Queen. It's been a little while. I am melting in this recording room, but I couldn't hold it off any longer. I want to resolve this battle. To quickly recap the situation, we are at the heart room of the Leviathan, where the heart itself, a cast of deity, demigod sort of thing, banished into this swimming prison by Dagon, is now in front of us, and us being two remaining ships, one captained by Hjalmar, one captained by Keinrich, upon which we find not only Oksana, but also Genaha of the Khalidim and Narabala, one of Hjalmar's former co-captains who lost her ship. Central to this cavernous space hangs the heart in its bone cage, connected to the whole of the Leviathan by what I would say constitutes its hard to reach weak points, this arterial webwork that suspends it and also ties it to these tormenting juices flowing through it and keeping it alive while also tormenting it for all eternity. And the chamber itself is roiling with these liquid, blood-like substances, this ooze that permeates this whole Leviathan, coming from the arterial pipes big enough to sail several ships through, that form the passages through the Leviathan, coming in this central cavern from all sides, filling it with torrents of this liquid that the muscular contractions of this chamber also slosh every which way, buffeting our two ships around and also making it possible for them to reach occasionally at least close to the heart as they get buoyed up and let down again rapidly, and we have to kind of figure out how we're going to fight this thing. Now, I have drafted up a little bit of a plan here, which basically says that we have several points of attack, some less fruitful than others. So obviously we could just ram the cage repeatedly with our ships and hopefully not incur the damage, which predicates probably a successful crew rating roll. But this cage is supernaturally sturdy. It keeps this demigod flesh contained and conscious. And so I gave it 35 hit points, which is basically saying this thing is unbreakable. Our main path to success lies in attacking the weak points, but we can't really attack the weak points unless we get close to the weak points. And to do so, I've devised like a set of rules which basically says we can only hit the weak point if our bolts attack them by shooting arrows, throwing spears, etc. if we crit, or we can take the path from the entry point that we can reach if we're buffeted up here to the heart and climb those 4 stages all the way up to where these pseudo arteries connect and enchain the heart there, and then start cutting there where it's a lot more feasible to do damage, where it's a lot easier to hit, and therefore we need only to do 20 damage only, while we're being under attack, while we're being buffeted around, all these things. I kind of rigged this for failure because I don't think it should be possible to win this, but it should be at least possible to have a chance to win this. And if this ends with half of everyone dead and the rest being expunged in a fountain of gore through a blowhole, that is fine by me. It's not written anywhere that this plan needs to succeed. Remember, we are still in kind of a flashback sequence, even though that bears no restriction on the outcome. Dead is dead. But it would give us a nice sort of conflict if we actually fail here. So it's not like failure state is actually a problem. It is more like the expected result when fighting something that is technically probably the worst enemy you can battle in this world, at least head on. We have infiltrated, we've managed to make it this far. This is farther than we probably should have gotten, and now we're in for it. We have to somehow ascend here and do enough damage to cut the heart loose and separate it, in which case the leviathan, I think the prison being in this sort of tormenting symbiotic relationship with the demigod flesh, dies, and we probably get expunged in a fountain of gore again. We'll see how this works out. Anyway, all of this to say, we are in for the fight of our lives, and we have to somehow devise a way to get out of here with at least one or two of our point of view characters. If you are actually wondering how I would deal with everybody dying, I have a plan. Let's see if it actually comes to fruition. Wish me luck, or don't, depending on what you want to see. Now, the ships are trying to maintain control on the surroundings and at the same time steer their course to coincide with the upslosh of the liquid in the chamber so they can get carried closer to the heart, which means we should check a thing first. We roll our crew rating. The crew rating for Keinrig is 12, the crew rating for Hjalmar is only 10 at the moment. Red is Hjalmar, blue is Keinrig. Keinrig blows it with a critical failure, which means that in the first round of exchanges he gets no action on his ship. But it does mean that Hjalmar gets to act before the heart does something, and I did give the heart 2 actions where the heart itself can act. If somebody is close, it can shoot spikes out of its bone cage. If somebody is farther away, it can shoot this liquid out of the various dangling appendages that it has. And I also gave the room its own separate kind of action entity, which means that the room itself can either cause a wave to slosh through, or the creatures can come and attack the boat, or try and grab some of the crew. These flying creatures, these moray-like worms in the water, will try to interfere with the combat. And I'm figuring that, sticking a bit to the spirit of the rules, we can't have the heart always perform the same action or the room always perform the same action, so they'll be alternating between the two. Now, however, the waves come crashing in, and Hjalmar and Keinrig immediately find themselves separated. Hjalmar sort of catching the wave and riding it close to the heart, whereas Keinrig gets lifted up and almost tilts over, kind of locked in place and holding on to maintain position and not get swept, crushed into the muscle tissue pulsating walls of this cavern, which is unfortunate because Keinrig's goal was to also get close to the heart, where a few of the boarding party members are already poised to jump and try and ascend this thing, having realized already that their only avenue of attack is anything that is actually exposed but also suitable to do significant damage. Whereas Hjalmar now shoots along with the wave up and up close to the heart, trying not to ram, but trying to fire off a first test salvo as the crew makes ready to attack the weak spots from below, and we see whether we can land possibly our first hit, we have a 5% chance to make it happen. We had a 5% chance to also critically fail, which we have just done. I think we will resolve this by giving us disadvantage on the fallout of dealing with the consequences. The ship, Hjalmar's ship, got too close, the salvo overshoots, and now the spikes come out of the heart and try to impale the pesky attackers. We're making a defensive roll with disadvantage against 10. I don't even want to know what these odds are. Okay, so double 1. I feel like this demands some kind of oracle intervention where something special and positive for us happens now, because this is ridiculous. I am going to insert like a little bit of a twist here, and I'm gonna check with the Dark Gods Oracle. So roll a d66 for a theme. The red die goes first. 63 failure, 13 ghost. The ghost of failure works to our advantage. Now, I feel like this is the failure of the heart. It is remembering its demigod days and the final battle against Dagon that it lost, trying to usurp, which is why it finds itself here. And now it has a disadvantage from that somehow. It is perhaps overly cautious, it is fearful of something here. It hurts itself in its confusion? No, I don't really... I think I got it. I think we have an option here which we can make use of to maybe add a little bit of a crowd control element to it. We can assume that perhaps the sailors on the two ships are sailing into battle, fervently chanting their battle songs and their hymns and everything that is sort of appropriate to an escalating moment like this, calling upon the gods, calling upon Dagon potentially as the entity that rules the waves. And this is actually something that the heart responds to. So maybe we can insert a mechanism that whenever one of our ships is close enough for melee attack, the heart has a potential to get scared by the hymns and the chants and just recoils from these religious invocations of Dagon. And thus it has to make a check first to see if it has to perhaps skip its turn for this particular round. I'm going to give it a 14 for the fear check because it's just an imposing, unholy, powerful creature. And I guess I'm going to do that now and see if it maybe has to skip the next turn. It does not. Okay, so the heart gets infuriated by the invocation of the name of its accursed father. And we have to still survive the room's actions or the wave. We have to do our crew ratings check now to stay the course and deal with the waves. And Heinrich gets smashed by a wave, crashing into the side wall and then catching the returning pull, getting sucked close towards the heart for the next round, but 2 go overboard, the crew rating drops, screaming ensues as sailors are consumed by the horrors in this blood-like substance. This is quite punishing, by the way. I think our only chance to success here is to somehow make it close enough to the heart to deposit, let's be honest, Genaha, Oksana, maybe another handful of others, and successfully climb and chop this thing, because by the time we're done with it, the boats are very, very likely just splinters. So let's see if we can make it happen. We will have to make our crew ratings check again, this time to reflect our actions. I think Hjalmar is again circling back around trying to shoot, and Heinrich is trying to navigate close and drop off his cargo, his assault party. and critical hit for Hjalmar's eagle-eyed. Okay, And Heinrich also succeeds in getting close. These dice are swingy as hell today. I think as far as damage goes, we can just assume that it's a die 6. Okay, a volley of spears and well-placed arrows and slingshot rains up towards the domed, suspending ceiling of this cavern where this network of arteries connects the bone cage to the rest of the leviathan, and a momentary darkening of the air occurs as this well-synchronized volley converges all on the same spot and rips through the tissue of a connecting vein-like suspension that gets severed and unloads a corrosive liquid down upon the heart, which immediately convulses, and everyone on board the boats is shuddering for a split second as a psychic scream rings out in everyone's minds. Meanwhile, by the way, the psychic advisor of Hjalmar is sitting cross-legged, suspended in the center of the ship, eyes closed, unaware, seemingly, of their surroundings. Now, Heinrich is in position, which means that Genaha, Oksana, and are we going to give a heroic moment to Narabala? I think so. Narabala's redemption arc begins here. They get ready, ropes with grappling hooks to throw them into the reachable structure at the lower end of the heart to hook in and pull themselves up. Everybody has to make a dexterity check. Narabala's dexterity is 10, die 6 plus 7, and we'll give Narabala the metal die. Oksana is red, Gina is blue. That's another crit. I swear I haven't changed these dice around or anything. This is just insane today. So I think what that means is that we have reached this point here with Oksana and Narabala, and Genaha has already managed to throw her grappling hook so far that she has managed to zip up to a much higher position, leaving the other two behind her. So she's skipped effectively a stage here. Now we're holding on for dear life as the heart attacks, and since it used the spikes last time, I don't think that's going to be our welcoming committee. It will shoot a jet of liquid in all directions, so we will see that we defend ourselves. Maybe I'll just roll a die 6 here. 1 to 2 is Hjalmar, 3 and 4 is Heinrich, and 5 and 6 is both. Heinrich gets jetted on by a spurt of corrosive blood and just barely evades it. So the room meanwhile unleashes its creatures on Hjalmar, and he evades with either a 1 or a 7. Okay, this is an awful lot of 1s here. That is giving me a little bit of pause. Like, I'm not saying it can't happen, but I'm a little bit suspicious, so I've swapped out the dice. We have now got a black one and a blue one, a different blue one, and we'll see if this just keeps happening. On a action level, that means that Hjalmar deftly avoids a set of flailing, long, tube-like, razor-mouthed creatures that shoot out of the crest of a wave that tries to slosh over Hjalmar's ship, and he turns it around, and they ineffectively basically perform a little bit of a jumping show and land back in the liquid without doing any damage. Now, our actions for this round, I'm rolling Heinrich and Hjalmar into one action bucket just for ease of doing the rollies. Hjalmar, I think, is going to try and keep just volume of fire on the weak spots and trying to cover as well the ascend here. I think as soon as we reach the top, he's going to have to stop doing that. But for now, that probably works quite well. And I think Heinrich is just going to do the same, because the meat of the fight is happening once we get potentially up here if we manage to get up here. So let's see if we score a crit on one of these again. Okay. 1 damage. The next volley rises up, one from Hjalmar's ship and one from Heinrich's, and Hjalmar scores another hit, this time just grazing one of the tubes and making it start to leak this substance, this corrosive liquid. Let's see how our climbing trio does. That is 1 more progress for Ginaha, and no progress for Oksana and Narabala, who are still holding on to their entry point. I think unless we critically fail, we manage to hold on. But of course we're gonna have to evade the spike attacks now. Literally now. So all 3 of them that are in direct contact with the heart are going to have these bone spikes shooting out of all the cage walls that they are near. And that is a hit on Ginaha, who is not armored and therefore takes 8 damage. Meaning that she can not take another one of these, but this is one of the maybe max level kind of foes, so we're actually tangling with something fairly radically unpleasant here, and this can kill us at any given moment. That's what makes it so much fun. None of our ships have gotten into melee range in this round, so we don't have to do our fear check. But we do have to avoid a wave again on Heinrich. Nope, just barely doesn't avoid it. It's down to crew rating 8. And the ship, this theocracy vessel, is now in tatters. There is leaks everywhere, not enough crew to keep it afloat effectively. It is starting to look very, very grim, and our seasoned captain is already thinking about maneuvering it closer to Hjalmar so they might at least make the jump over when it inevitably sinks. I think that's also what he's trying to do now. His maneuver is just to stay close to Hjalmar, who just keeps attacking relentlessly. That is a miss for both of them, so they can... Well, Hjalmar's next volley falls short, or goes long rather. I think they're erring on the side of caution. They don't want to give Ginaha a new haircut. Not that he has any hair. And Heinrich's floundering vessel is struggling too much against the waves to get close to Hjalmar, who is also just maneuvering around and much faster and more agile. How are our climbers doing? Everyone succeeds, and Ginaha crits, which means I'm just gonna give her an attack. She's made it to the top. Oksana and Narabala are 1 step further. Well, actually, yeah, that's correct. So everybody succeeds, and Ginaha gets an attack. I don't want to make it too overpowered. I think it's nice to get a free attack, but I think just with all the volley of shooting happening and with the corrosive liquid sloshing around, she's gonna have to do this attack with disadvantage. And she still hits it home. So we do 1 die 8 damage. Wow, she hits like an absolute truck. That is insane. Yeah, we're picturing Ginaha reaching up, and she's basically doing the climbing with her daggers. So she's pushing the daggers in, pulling her body weight up, ripping the dagger through this tissue. And as she reaches this sort of more even slope that she can almost rest a knee on without sliding off, she wraps one arm around this flailing, convulsing tube and just starts going to town and stabbing and screaming. Jesus, we might actually do this. That is a huge amount of damage. But now, of course, the retaliation happens. The ships are still not in the vicinity. As soon as you're in contact with the heart, it can shoot out the spikes. That is not subject to the rules of the engagement here. So we'll have to see. That would actually be the end of Ginaha. It is definitely taking some damage from Narabala as well, whose hit points are equal to her constitution, which is 10. So she's down to 2. But I think for Ginaha we are going to call on doom to see if we can subtract our Doom die result from this 13, because then if we roll a 2 at minimum, we actually manage to do the dodge. Right, it works in automatically downgrading it to a d4. And now we see anything but a 1. That was a 1. Okay, so that puts her at effectively 0 hit points. Does that mean she's dead? Not yet. That means she is only able to talk feebly and not move, so she is currently impaled by a spike up there, hanging on and bleeding out. And now we have to succeed in the dodges for our ships. We do. Okay, so Keinrich doesn't sink, and now Hjalmar can't really do the shooting anymore without ripping Genaha to shreds, so he will instead rush in and also jump on here, I think. And Keinrich is gonna try and get close so they can maybe join forces, because his ship is falling apart. That means that Keinrich actually manages to stick close to Hjalmar, but Hjalmar doesn't manage to catch the wave just right, and the grappling hook falls short, and he can't make it on in this round. But they're in melee range now, so I think the heart will have to fail in terror, actually. For the first time, it has to skip its turn because of our chanting, which leaves Oksana and the hanging on by a thread Narabala. Oksana crits and makes it to the top to fall alongside her companion, trying to establish, is she just helpless? Is she dead? What is happening to her? Unable to quite tell in the heat of battle as corrosive liquid sloshes all around. Narabala is now almost there as well, but bleeding profusely. Oksana cannot attack in this round because she uses the crit to just bypass 2 steps on the way up to the top. And now we have to deal with the waves. So our ships have to do their avoidy dance. And they do. So Keinrich crits, which I think in this case, so many crits in this episode. This is like 8 or something. This is crazy. Keinrich crits, which in this case means that he's probably benefiting from this evasive maneuver. He doesn't need to roll to stick close to Hjalmar next turn. So we'll just do this automatically. And Hjalmar again tries to get within boarding range of this thing, and I think Keinrich now does it too, trying to maybe himself leap on over because the ship is screwed anyway. Neither of them succeed, so they are just being kept away by this roiling fury that the heart, now heavily wounded, is contracting and pulsating more. Now Oksana attacks and Narabala still climbs. And Oksana hits and Narabala doesn't succeed. She stays on this level. And Oksana now stabbing and cutting, covered in this grime, in this liquid, in all of these fluids sloshing around here. And does enough damage to cut through another pipe, which puts the heart's heavy load under critical mass. Enough of the suspension has been ripped away that the weight of the heart now rips through the rest of the tubing, and this enormous gaunt flesh encased in bone drops, and a mighty shudder goes through this entirety of the leviathan. And above, the sea is still and quiet. The surface doesn't ripple. Everything is calm. Maybe a few birds circling above. They sense that there is something in the water, that there is something happening, that there may be a glorious meal waiting for them. And as they circle and caw, the surface of the water starts to get a little restless. And before long, a lot restless, as a vortex tunnel forms, as something gargantuan sucks the water in, almost like a vacuum collapsing in on itself, and replaces it with an absolute explosion of chunks of tissue, of fragments of bone, of gore, of all kinds, of arterial tubing, of intestinal material, and of copious amount of this vicious, viscous, blood-like substance. And in the middle of it all, somewhere, a shape buoys up to the surface, a caged container of god flesh and muscle tissue. Clinging to it, hopefully, Narabala, Oksana, and possibly even still Gnaha. I think Gnaha gets a freebie for this one because she's basically stapled to the thing. But I think Oksana and Narabala will have to determine how they do. They're hanging on. What's happening to our ships? Kynrick's ship doesn't make it to the surface. It stays torn to splinters somewhere down with the sinking corpse of the Leviathan. Does Kynrick himself survive? Yes or no? I think that's likely, seeing how he was prepared for this. Yes, Kynrick and 3 of his crew have managed to make it onto Hjalmar's ship, the only surviving one of the 3 that went in. They're braving this storm, this tempest, as the skies grow angry, as clouds come out of nowhere, as a hellish storm breaks loose, and the surface of the water is foaming and roiling and turning red, and chunks of flesh the size of mighty icebergs are now floating in between where this soul ship is bobbing and trying to get close to this heart that is also floating in all this mess, because they still have to somehow get this to Beleth Nagar, to where the heart is wanted. And that's where we're going to pick it up next time. Thank you very much for watching. I'll catch you then, and bye for now.